Good morning. So it's me between the breaks, so maybe you can smell some stuff going on outside. Thank you very much, Rick. 3 things from me then in the next 10 minutes or so. The first is answering the essay question, is a lot to do with can it smell and other questions. And really a hunt that I went on and a hunch that I had where the whole dialogue around AI is really around the stuff that it's going to take, the stuff that it's going to replace. Maybe it's some sort of deep human insecurity that I thought, well, there must be some things that it can't do. So that's part 1. Part 2 is about something that David talked about this morning, this whole democratization of creativity, to give it the kind of the fancy term, but the idea that generative AI means that I don't necessarily need to have lots of technical knowledge around how to be creative. I can just do it. It's not about how much money I earn or my status. These tools are there and they're available, and I can do stuff. And then part 3, to sum it all up, I got thinking about my own relationship, I guess, with creativity and how I think that generative AI really excels in these places that are kind of on the limits of creativity, the stuff that's kind of outside of the brackets, outside of some of the boundaries. To start with, though, this kind of mad idea that I had in a shower about 3 weeks ago, surely there's got to be some stuff that it can't do. Wouldn't that make for an interesting 10 minutes to an engaged audience? I was utterly floored when I came across this, because my initial search was, well, can it smell? This is the artificial nose from Microsoft's AI Tech Lab, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. So it's an algorithm that has been trained to look at the compound of different gases and then work out what the object is that you can see here. It's kind of smelling coffee. So very, very quickly, that's sort of a 10-minute engaged presentation down the pan. So utterly floored with that. This has got loads of applications. So one, it could tell you if some food has gone off, see that you don't serve it, or milk's gone off, something like that. It could tell you when a toilet or a hotel room would need cleaning just by the smell. For a cosmetics company, if they make perfume, for example, it could start to think about maybe there's some non-sustainable ingredients that go into it. Maybe you could start to swap those out and put some more sustainable ones in without affecting the scent, and maybe the human nose couldn't detect it. Or maybe there's only like 2 people in the world that could detect it, but the AI could do it for you. So loads of applications for this. So it kind of floored me a bit. At the same time, I was looking and playing with lots of generative AI tools. This is one that I came across. This is absolutely brilliant. This is playphrase.me. It's effectively a search engine which looks at quotes from movies and TV shows. So here you can see, I'm going to kick your ass. It will find every quote of that in every film and TV show that there's kind of ever been. In brackets, if you want this for decks and things like that, it's an absolutely brilliant tool. And there's 7 million phrases kind of in this database. And as I say, it's an algorithm that goes out, finds that clip somewhere on the internet, clips it up, puts it in, and allows you to download it. And when I looked into the Patreon page, so Patreon is a membership platform for creators. This is Evgeny. He's the founder, and he does this roadmap, this update of kind of what's coming next. And in the comments, someone says, well, it would be really interesting if rather than searching for phrases, I could search for emotions. So what if I could search for someone laughing and it gives me a whole bunch of clips of people laughing? That would be really good. Jordan jumps in, well, that would be impossible. But luckily, the savior of the day is David, and he comes in and he says, well, actually, it's only impossible until someone does it. And that, for me, kind of became this new mantra that I had. We're trying to crack the code that is AI and the stuff that it can't do. So I just kind of put it to bed and thought, we don't really need to worry about that. So I stopped thinking about maybe what some of the limits of AI were and what it couldn't do, accepted that the impossible is going to be done all the time. And it got me thinking more around much of what David was talking about this morning, this democratization of creativity, the idea that these tools are now in our hands for us to create what we want. We don't need to learn for years on how to do them. And I thought an interesting lens to look through it would be photography. If you go all the way back with analog cameras, 35mm film, if you think about it, you kind of had very limited opportunities, however much film you've got to take those photos. There was no sense of you take the photo and you preview it and then you take it again to try and get the best one. You didn't find out what you've got until you developed the film, maybe weeks, days later. So you kind of had chances to do it. The cameras themselves were pretty expensive, and you needed to be trained in order to be a brilliant photographer, to think about ratio aspects and how to set scenes and stuff like that. So lots of barriers to entry. Digital cameras made it a little bit easier, SLR cameras, so it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It will do things like the white exposure, and it will start to do some light filters, and you can put lenses on these things to get different types of effects. What's more, you can take a lead, you can plug it into a computer, and you can start to manipulate some of the images that you've got. So it becomes a bit more accessible, but I still need to know how to do that stuff. I still need some kind of training on a program like Photoshop in order to do it. I need to buy that, I need to buy the kit. So there's still some barriers to entry. John talked about mobile this morning, and it's really smartphones that changed everything. It became very, very accessible then. This idea being that the best camera you can ever have is the one that you've got with you all the time, and smartphones were literally that in our pockets, and on our purses, and our bags. So for the first time, we all became pretty brilliant photographers. And to help that, we had things like filters to help us make them even better. Subjectively, though, you could look at two photos that two different people have taken. You could say one is slightly better than another. There's still lots of cues of photography and taking good photographs that you'd still need to know about. And now we're in this age of generative AI where I don't need any of those things. I don't need to know. I don't even have to take a photograph. I don't need to have trained and understand any of those principles of taking it. The thing I need to understand is not about how many shots I get with a film, or which lens I need to use, or which filter I put on. What I need to understand is how to prompt something to give the AI an instruction, to give it the output that I want. And for me, it's about learning this whole new creative vocabulary, using all the language that we've got around photography and how we've made images in the past. But now what we need to become are prompters. And I don't need any skills to do that. I just need to kind of learn a way of doing it. And you can see here on this Hawaiian pizza how it's been created. Things in the prompt which talk about a specific type of lens, depth of focus, shutter speed, how it's lit, the type of grading that's used. This photo has never existed. No person has ever kind of taken this. And for a person to take this would be a huge investment of time, of energy, of expense in order to do it. This may look like a shoot for a brand like McCain or Domino's or a Pizza Hut. They're investing lots of money, lots of expertise in getting a shot like that. That shot would have been created in minutes, probably about 2 minutes it would have taken to do it, with the right amount of prompts. And what I've spent the last 2 weeks doing is trying to learn this new creative vocabulary, so I can show you some of the kind of the fruits of my labor here. And I've become utterly obsessed with Midjourney. This is Midjourney, so this is a generative AI platform where you give it commands and you give it prompts, and it produces things for you. It's really easy to use. Most of it, there's a free version, so you can go in and play with it. And I've spent the last 2 weeks, what an amazing job I've got, of playing with it so I can show you the type of stuff that I'm doing. This stuff is always great when you've got a subject matter. And I was thinking about either kind of cultural icons, very well-respected people, maybe within our industry, who we've got sort of a shared experience with. And I struggled, so I thought I'd use John Mew, who's CEO of the IAB. You heard from him at the top, so we all know who John is. And I used a couple of photographs to prompt Midjourney to demonstrate the sorts of things we can do. I'm not a photographer, I don't have any skills, I've never done a course, I take a few photos on my phone, but I've never even owned a camera. But here's some of the stuff that it was coming up with just a few prompts. So I asked Midjourney to imagine John as a CBeebies children's TV presenter. I went a step further and said, well, imagine John as Fireman Sam. We kept going. I said, well, what if he was from a scene in Encanto? Got a mention earlier on from James. What if he was from the Disney epic Encanto? What would he look like? This was an interesting one. The prompt was all around a sort of a dingy English pub and a darts player who was stood on an oche with a pint in hand who was a bit inebriated. Didn't say anything about body shape or weight or anything. It's just sort of interesting what the AI came up with. This was about a catalogue model. Imagine John as a catalogue model in the 80s, modelling a shell suit. I asked them what Engage would have looked like in the 70s, and when John was doing his keynote address, he actually looks pretty epic there. And then the two-word prompt I used for the next one was simply pirate child. That's John Mew as a pirate child. And I don't know if it's my creation or it's the AI's creation. Maybe that's something you're going to get from another talk today. There's something else really, really cool that Midjourney does. So this is stuff where you can give it some prompts and it creates stuff for you. Blend is the idea of taking two or more images and the AI will fuse them together, and you can give it some prompts around that. This was very interesting as well. So I started putting some things together. This is John Mew and Julia Donaldson's Gruffalo. It's a bit of a sort of dad theme coming through here, James, today, isn't there? We sort of set the tone for everyone else. This is what the AI came up with. John Mew reimagined as the Gruffalo. I thought about one of John's heroes, actually. This is Jay Cartwright from The In-Betweeners. And what that might come up with, that's quite haunting. Oh, not a million miles away, and you can still kind of understand it. But by far my greatest / terrifying creation is these two. Everybody, please meet Elon Mew. So I had lots and lots of fun with playing with the AI and really trying to, I guess, prove this point that it is completely democratized now. I think all of those things probably took me less than 2 hours to do with no training, with no idea of kind of doing this stuff. I read some stuff online, I read some blogs, I put some stuff in, and this is kind of what it created for me. Again, in literally minutes, seconds and minutes, this stuff was created. I could never, ever do this myself. And then you kind of come on to part 3 and me thinking about, I guess, my own relationship with creativity. And it tied in with a time where I was back in mid-Wales, in Aberystwyth, and that's where I studied 20 or so years ago. I studied performance studies and drama with Rick, believe it or not, your MC today. And this guy here, Professor Mike Pearson, who the world lost a year ago, and I was back in Aberystwyth for a celebration of his life and all the work that he'd done. And he had a really profound effect on the way I sort of think about creativity. So Mike was Professor of Performance Studies. And you wouldn't say he was an actor. He wasn't kind of like a thespian. He didn't do plays, so he didn't sort of learn lines and pretend to be someone. You know, Mike would go and do these epic performances in gravel pits and disused car factories, or he'd spend the night on the beach doing this kind of time-lapse thing. And when you watched him, you were never really sure if he was acting or he was sort of being himself. It was very strange, but it really hit a nerve with me and influenced me in a huge way to think about performance as a job interview, as to what I'm doing now just because I'm on a stage, and lots of other things. He says these things in his book, which really triggered a thought with me when it came to AI. Perhaps this is why my practice is always at the edges, the outskirts, in the brackets. And it got me thinking about the limits of stuff, of life, of things that have been created. And where I think generative AI really, really thrives is just outside of those brackets and just outside of those limits. This kind of was at the same time where I was looking at lots of different technologies as well. So just like Midjourney, OpenAI, famously for ChatGPT, they have some generative image software called DALL-E. And DALL-E had just brought out a new feature, which was called outpainting. And what outpainting does, you might have seen it in the start film, it starts to use all the elements of an existing image, and it will start to put things around them. So I thought I would try things like that, because it proved brilliantly this point of, here's the limits, here's the photo. This is the seminal debut album from Oasis, Definitely Maybe, a photo, I think it's in a North London flat, maybe someone will keep me honest on that. But effectively, that's it. That's the limits of what we know about that time, when it was taken, on that day, in 1990, whatever. What outpainting can do, in literally seconds, is start to fill in stuff that might have been there already. Now, the photographer may well have taken a step back on the day and taken a wider shot. You could recreate this. You could get Liam and Noel and Bonehead and all back together in that flat and take the photo. Maybe you could do it at large expense, technicality, but just look at it in terms of what it can do. I mean, it's absolutely seamless in what it can do. This is me on this stage last year at Engage. I love this photo because it's not entirely clear what you're looking at, so I put this into to DALL-E and asked outpainting to show me what I'm looking at, and it came up with this, some sort of pink flamingos on the thing, which I thought was very interesting. And this is our leadership summit. This is a good one. This is our leadership summit earlier in the year. Interestingly, the photo is kind of cropped at John's waist. And I was interested to know what the AI would produce when you went into it. So there was a bit of prompting there. The most interesting thing about this thing, if you can spot it, the shadows are all completely correct, apart from you look at like this sort of coat stand thing that's going on behind John, just to his left, which sort of feels pretty bizarre. So it's not entirely perfect. It's not entirely perfect yet. But the limits of things and starting to extend those, I think, gets very, very interesting, where AI can play a real role. And then I saw this article from Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks saying, actually, I could kind of go on forever with AI. And isn't life this sort of perfect limit this perfect bracket. Tom Hanks is born into this world. He goes on to have this stellar career, features in some of the biggest and best movies of all time, wins lots of awards, but one day Tom Hanks is going to leave this world, and we will never have Tom Hanks again. His suggestion that actually generative AI and some of the work that he'd done on the Polar Express means that Tom Hanks can kind of go on forever. Everyone can go on forever. That's something else to be debated, but we're no longer limited by the fact that we need Tom Hanks around to have him in our films. And I'll leave you with this point, and it's more on the dad theme that James was talking about earlier. I want to introduce you to Magic Animal Friends. This is a series of books, series of 30 books, written for 6-year-olds. My daughter, Hallie, who is 4, almost 5, is absolutely obsessed with these books. We are on book number 27 at the moment of 30. And at some point, I'm going to have a fairly difficult bedtime conversation about the fact that there are no more books. And I think in her mind, that's going to be quite a difficult one to suggest. The plot with this thing is always the same. Lily and Jess, 2 girls in the human world, they get taken into Friendship Forest by a cat called Goldie, which is, when they get into Friendship Forest, all of the animals can talk, they stand on 2 legs, they wear things, and what they're there to do is to conquer the witch Griselda, who is trying to take Friendship Forest from the animals and keep it for herself. And each of the 30 books are about a different character. So Lottie Little Stripe, the badger, you've got Chloe Puddlefoot, the otter, etc., etc. This kind of exists in the brackets of 30 books. There isn't any resources anywhere else to do it. Within an hour, I was able to use Midjourney to create a rabbit, which I called Hallie Fluffytail, and just by ingesting some of the covers of the books that already exist, so it's come up with a new character for me. And then using ChatGPT to give it some prompts around, here's the sort of the narrative arc, here's the kind of thing that I want, in the style of this, and then able to tweak it as it comes. So there was no mention of the Toadstool Cafe. I know, unbelievable. So chapter 4 then became around the Toadstool Cafe. I wanted the final chapter to be about Hallie Fluffytail finding fluffy ears, finding her sort of inner strength and her bravery to take on Griselda. So we wrote in that. We wrote in about the Boggits, which are these sort of gremlin-type minions, and Snippet the Crow. So added in lots of stuff, and now I've credibly got at least 20 minutes worth of bedtime story content, but this can go on forever. It's no longer limited. Before it was 30 books written in 2018. Now it's this thing that can go and go and go and go. So 3 things just to leave you with before we go and have coffee. Give up the ghost. John said at the very start as well, stop trying to find the stuff that hasn't been done yet that AI kind of can't do. Been there, done that, not possible. The impossible is being done. People are thinking about this stuff. So I think about how you work with it. Think about this new creative vocabulary that doesn't care for status or wealth or how well trained you are. Anyone can use it. It's entirely free. You have to have a mindset where you want to go in and play, solve some problems, do that kind of thing. But think about the stuff that you can extend, stuff that is limited, the boundaries, the brackets around things. That's where the really interesting creative things happen. So from me and from an 18th century oil painting of Elon Mew, thank you very much.